Excellent. Good recommendations. Anyone else has recommendations for favorite books? Put them in the chat. Well, it looks like we have a good amount of people on. I know some people are still going to trickle in here as we get started, but let's go ahead and kick us off, everyone. So welcome to our conversation today, how to turn your company culture into a talent magnet. This is something I've really been looking forward to. So I'm super excited to be here. My name is Natalie Morgan. I'm the Senior Director of People at CareerPlug, and I'll be helping facilitate the conversation today. Before I introduce the stars of our show here, a couple logistics for folks. One, we are recording this conversation, so we'll send a copy of the recording and a whole bunch of other resources, anything we mention, in a follow-up email tomorrow, so you can rely on that. And then feel free to use the chat and Q&A feature in Zoom throughout. We're going to have time to take questions kind of in the back half of the conversation, so use the Q&A for that. And the chat is also a great place to share your own insights, right? We're not only hoping to learn from, Clint and Ben here, but I think we can all learn from each other on this webinar. So go ahead and use the chat for that. Okay, well, without further delay, I'm so pleased to introduce Clint Smith and Ben Siegel. Ben is the owner of the iconic Banger Sausage House and Beer Garden in Austin, Texas, which if you haven't been to, you definitely should pay it a visit. Bangers is not only about being a wonderful place to eat, drink, and hang out, but also a wonderful place to work. And Clint Smith, my boss, is the founder and CEO of CareerPlug and the author of the book, How to Hire, the Essential Guide to Recruit and Retain the Right People, which just released this week, yesterday. In fact, there's the book, and that's one of the resources we'll actually send you after this webinar, and our follow-up is a free e-copy of it, so you can get all those resources. A bunch are also on howtohire.com. A lot of free downloads to help you with your hiring and recruiting efforts. And with that, I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen because today is truly a conversation, not just like an information dump of slides. And we want to hear from Clint and Ben. So Clint, I'm going to kind of kick us off here. First, congrats, you released a book yesterday. That's a really big deal.
Thank you.
I've been very excited for it. And I want to kind of start with the inspiration for this particular topic. You have 3 sections in the book, and the first one is called Culture. Can you just kick us off? Why in a book about hiring did you choose to start with a section called Culture?
Thanks, Natalie, and thanks for everyone for joining us today. For me, culture is the foundation of everything when it comes to really running your business and doing anything with your team. And you're going to attract the people that are aligned with your culture. So if you want to attract the right people and retain them for the long run, you've got to promote your culture. You've got to first understand what it is. You've got to live it as part of your team. And then you've got to be able to promote it externally, because that's the magnet that's going to pull in the right people and connect them to your organization and make sure that they stay with you.
Yeah, 100%. Ben, not everyone, hopefully everyone's familiar with Bangers, especially if they've been to Austin, but can you tell us a little bit more about Bangers? It's obviously an Austin favorite. What was your kind of vision for Bangers in the beginning? How has that evolved over time?
Yeah, so it's Banger Sausage House and Beer Garden is the name, and I think like any good business, such as CareerPlug, right? You should be able to tell what the business does through the name of it. So we're a sausage house and beer garden on kind of the eastern edge of downtown Austin. It's a really big restaurant, right? So we have an 1,800 person capacity. We've got a team of, I think we're up to around 140 people right now that help us run a restaurant business. And then we have kind of a large corporate event side of the business. We're sort of a kind of a self-contained machine. And so we have a meat processing facility and pickling facilities and a lot of fun toys if you're into that stuff from a restaurant perspective. And then, I think from the beginning, I've just been really enamored with company culture, right? And I think really motivated by, I think first and foremost, wanting to create a really wonderful place for people to come into work, right? That was something I saw really clearly from the beginning. And I think as I got into it a little bit more, really understanding that, kind of all social change and anything that you want to do to improve the world starts at the individual level. And I think that the corporate environment, the place of work, is often an overlooked place where you can embark on a lot of that kind of change and internal evolution that's required to spark change in the world.
I love that. Clint, I'm going to bounce that same question back to you. Like, most people I think are probably familiar with CareerPlug on this call, but not all. Like, what was your kind of vision for CareerPlug, and how has that like changed for you over the years?
Yeah, thanks, Natalie. So I started CareerPlug in 2007 in my apartment in Austin. And the original idea was to provide kind of a recruitment marketing service. And we served larger organizations. We built some software on the back end to sort of power it. And, I went through this experience of trying to hire people, because at some point I had no more hours left in the day. I actually had to hire some people to help me with this, and hired a couple good ones and made some mistakes as well, and worked a lot on our hiring process and defining our culture. And I think somewhere probably about 5 years into it, I thought about who we were working with, and I felt much more passionate about helping small businesses and transitioning from a recruitment services business to more recruiting software. And that's who we are today. And we serve small businesses. And really the idea is that we're giving them a playbook and a system to be able to use, and resources to hire and develop the right people on their teams.
I love that. It's been fun being part of the whole CareerPlug story, just from my perspective.
Yeah, and just, like we've grown quite a bit. I mean, we have right around 100 employees now too. So both of our CareerPlug and Bangers, I think, are bigger than some companies that are on the call. But both of us have been through these stages of growth, and I think we're both going to share some stories that we went through. And really, the reason I wrote the book, guys, is I wanted to help people navigate some of those challenges that I went through myself. So a lot of the stories in the book are really just things that I had to learn the hard way. And I'm hoping to help you soften that blow a little bit.
Well, that's like, too enticing not to dig in there. What's a lesson you learned the hard way, Clint?
Oh, we didn't define our, some of the tenets of our culture early enough. So for me, the big three, and this isn't everything about culture. Culture is really just about how you operate as a team, day in and day out. But I think about your mission, your vision, and your values. And we didn't have them documented for a long time. I'd probably 3, 4, 5 years. And I understood what we wanted. I understood where we wanted to go, who we wanted to hire, like the types of characteristics we were looking for, but it wasn't documented. So it was all me. And that really, I had talented people on my team. I should have empowered them more to be able to help me get there sooner. And basically my hand got forced. I had to do it because eventually we started hiring. We had some managers on the team and people that were doing hiring that weren't me. And they were lost. They didn't know who to look for. They didn't know how to promote the company. And really with the people on their team, they didn't know how to develop them, discipline them, praise them, sometimes even let them go. And, I don't remember exactly what it was that forced me to really sit down one day and say, hey, we've got to get this figured out and we've got to get this documented. But that's probably one of the biggest lessons that I had, is that, like, you may think, hey, we're too small. We only have a handful of people on the team. It's never too early to get started with this stuff.
You're nodding your head, Ben. Do you have a similar lesson learned there?
I mean, yes, right. I think that's I would venture to say that's not a unique challenge that Clint navigated, right? And it's just such a vital component, and one that you continue to learn. I'm just thinking about just kind of right now and in some of the things we're dealing with, and we're kind of in the midst of some cultural change and thinking about the way that we're sort of looking at the organization and once again doubling down on. I had a I still do our employee orientation is kind of one of the things I've held on to. I think it's important. I think we're still a small enough organization that I can do that. And I just recently did an orientation with a person and was just like, how did they make it through the interview process, right? And it led to a longer conversation around, like, again, perfectly nice person, but they don't meet our values, right? Like, just in terms of, really, we have one of our values is joy, right? And the way you'd see it, we're in the hospitality business, that, like, they're bubbling and there's, energy coming up and all this. And it was just a very quiet, soft-spoken person that was sitting across the table from me. And I think that's another thing for people to remember is, it's not like a set it and forget it thing, right? You can, we have defined all the things that Clint's talking about, but if you're not continuing to discuss it and continue to look at it, a lot of times it can fall to the wayside. And so we're right now retooling our hiring process to ensure that our core values are more of a filter on the front end, right? And just trying to add a few more steps to the process. So yeah, it always continues.
Yeah. Can you share more about that? Because I think that's really good, like, practical advice for people. Like, how do you evaluate for core values in your hiring process?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, as Clint said, right, it starts with really understanding what your values are. And so, I read a book. Both Clint and I really like to read books a lot, but I think it's called "What You Do Is Who You Are," and it was a really interesting book on values, and what they promoted was this concept of, like, virtues over values, and that they need to be more action oriented. And so we actually have pretty long form values. We have a word, we have a phrase, and then kind of a little bit more of a paragraph. The idea being that this can really be used as a tangible management tool, but also kind of that it should be the filter through which people come into the organization and then by which they leave the organization, right? Like, if you're living by these ideals, then you're doing the thing. And that was the conversation I had with my senior leaders about this particular thing, was like, hey, look to the values, think about why this gal didn't work out for us. And if we're missing something in there, like, this is a living document, right? Again, we shouldn't be throwing these out and creating new values all the time. But if we need to add or subtract a word based on how we're evolving as an organization, then we need to do that, right? And from there, and again, there's some great insight into that in this great book I read recently. But I think a lot of it has to do with kind of crafting interview questions that speak to the values, right? Creating scenarios that make it blindingly obvious the kind of behaviors that you would hope to have based on these words on a page, right? And a lot of that is rooted in the understanding of your team, making sure that, like, and that's why we went for more long form values, so there would be no wiggle room in, like, our basic understanding of what's going on. The better they get it, the better they can go out and get other people that are it.
And in my experience, Ben, the best candidates, the ones that are most aligned with their values, you know it before you don't have to ask them a question about it. Tell me about how you live Be Kind value or something like that, or work together, win together. It just comes out in the interview, and they talk about it, and you don't even need to screen for it. It comes through. For the ones that are missing, yeah, you should have questions that you're ready to ask to try to tease some of that out. But the more you have to tease it out, the bigger question mark I've got about, like, I don't know, do they really have it?
And that, I think that's exactly right, Clint. It's funny you said that, right? Again, a call I'm planning to make after this. I had a conversation with our kind of head of front of house. We're talking about this, and one of the things he said is like, this person only had, there was one step to the interview process. To talk to one person, they got hired, and we need, there needs to be 4 steps and multiple people and all this and that. But I was reflecting on it last night, and I'm like, I knew within 3 minutes that this person wasn't a culture fit, and I'm doing all the talking, right? It's orientation. I'm presenting to them, but, like, you can almost feel it just energetically that, like, this is not a host that should be greeting all of our people, right? Like, that they're all of our customers that are coming through the door. And so, yeah, man, I think it's true both ways. I think is, again, as business owners and operators, I do think there's a need to document, and there is a need to process, right? And that's never going to go away. But I also think if you do a good enough job of having value aligned people within the organization and ensuring that your most value aligned people are the ones that are conducting the interview, it really is as simple as saying, hey, just go hire somebody like yourself. And if you're not getting that vibe, then make it a quick conversation.
Yeah. Ben, what do you think the cost of of bringing someone on the organization that has misaligned values has? Like, what are some things that come to mind or experiences you've had in that area?
Man, it really depends on the level of the organization through which they're hired in, right? And that's one of the things I've found, especially if one of the things again, our cultures are similar in that built into our values is this concept of people that value growth, right, and development. And, I think where someone is on their journey is truly impactful, right? And so I've had, we've made hires at the lower end of the organization where there was a value misalignment. Look, there were no big deal, right? You hire a dishwasher, you hire a single server, so long as you act in a reasonably timely manner, you can get away with just a few bumps or bruises. But man, I can tell you, not proudly, but I've wrecked my entire organization through well-intentioned leadership hires that ended up not being value aligned. And that I failed as the owner by allowing to stay there and continue on. And for me, where the real learning there that I would share with everybody is again, I believe they were well-intentioned hires in that I do believe that the one guy I'm thinking about in particular valued growth, right? He wanted to grow as an individual, but he was so immature in his own growth journey that he was affecting all the people below him. So if he was, just say a server and not the person that was in charge of all the servers, you've got more of a bandwidth and a tolerance for how close of a cultural alignment they are. That makes sense.
And what's happened, and the one I can think of, I think we both had one person in particular in mind, like a leader that was like, oh man, that was a tough stretch. For us, I had a leader that I hired, and very talented person, right? Great at his job, but not a culture fit. And what ended up happening was he created his own silo of a culture within his team, right? That more matched his values. And so what we ended up having was the company values and then his team's values, and it was totally misaligned. And the kind of the whole idea of working together between teams, which is really important for us in particular, it was just a mess. And I ultimately got it. I figured it out, and it was clear as day. But I should have done it sooner. If I had been more cautious about evaluating on the front end, probably could have saved some headache and grown a lot faster in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I think what's again, what's tricky, again, in my situation was in one instance, right? Again, it was a perfect value alignment. Like this guy in particular, right, he was just really insecure, was kind of his issue. And so he was challenged with receiving feedback, but he was aware of that. We talked about it, and he actually improved on it in the time that he was there. And we'd sit down and we'd talk, but along the way, when he would get feedback, he would act super defensively to the people that he was talking, that he was getting the feedback from. And the challenge was, in his role, pretty soon there was no feedback being given anymore. You do that one or two times at that position, there's no opportunity for growth. And so it wasn't so much that, kind of, again, in your instance, it sounds like there was a different set of values. And then now there was a group of people that were adhering to those values. For me, it was someone that actually, like, there was value alignment. They were just early in their journey, but then it wrecked the culture because of how they acted out and where their relative role was.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one thing that another mistake that I made that I want to share is we had too many values to start. I don't know, Natalie, I think it was like 6 or 7, right? I just, they all sounded so good. And I was like, let's keep adding to them. And some of the values weren't clearly defined. Like you said, like there was ambiguity with them. Like we had one called give back. And I was like, all right, does that give back outside of the office, or does that give back and being helpful with your team and giving to your team? Like, that's just one example. But With 6 or 7 values, it's hard to say, hey, a person's got to have 100% alignment, or else they can't go, they can't stay here. And what ended up happening was, yeah, this person's great for 5 of them, but then they're off for this other one, or there's other 2. And it was an issue. So we reduced it down to 4, and we made sure they were really well defined. We made sure there weren't also like values that were lived by our teammates that were great. So we took a look, and I talk about this in the book. This is the book that actually inspired me to do this when we did it on our end, when we kind of redid our values, was The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni, which is also the guy that wrote 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. The Advantage is nice, guys, because you get both the story, you get all the 5 dysfunctions of a team content, and then you get some other great stuff like how to create your values. But again, I go over all this stuff in my book too, and give Patrick Lencioni all the credit. But what we did was really focus on who are the people at our organization that really exemplify our values and our culture, and how do we hone in on them, and what is it about this, and what value does this one person really exemplify more than anything else? And then we took a group of those, and then we worked on narrowing those down. We looked at some of those. There were a couple of the values that, like, we could say, oh well, there was someone else who was clearly not a good match for our team in the past that also had those. So it wasn't as much of a differentiator as we needed it to be. And then, we narrowed it down to 4, and that's where we've stuck. So ours are: be kind, speak up, step up, keep growing, and work together, win together. We use those from the entire life cycle, from when someone, we promote a job, we advertise it, we hire for them, it's on the hiring scorecard. We talk about it during orientation. We talk about it in reviews, in just kind of gratitude and shout outs, we call them, like employee recognition. We encourage people to assign like a core value to when they give recognition to someone else. And then we also use it for discipline. Like, we use something called the People Analyzer, which is tied to EOS, it's kind of operating system. And, in addition to, like, does the person get it? Do they want it? Do they have the capacity? We also look at the 4 values and say, are they meeting these four values that we have? And if they're not, we're working with them on that. And sometimes that's the reason that they have to leave the organization. It'd be good to hear about how you've got them incorporated into your world as well, Ben.
Well, but I think it's right on, Clint, right? Like, I think that, what's striking to me about, again, reading your book and reading, again, a lot of the books that inspired us and inspired this book, Good to Great, 5 Dysfunctions of the Team, is, on the one hand, like, none of this stuff's complicated. Which is the beauty of it. It's all common sense. But as you just described, it's a lot of disciplined, repetitive work to make it stick, right? A lot of business owners will write values out of guilt and obligation. You need to do this. This is what a real company does, right? But unless you find your own way to weave that into the day-to-day practices that you have as an organization, then they really are just words on a page or on a wall or somewhere else. And so that's exactly right, man, right? Like, finding the ways to hire, and use it as a filter to come into the organization, right? We run a restaurant. So every week or 2 weeks, depending on, the traction we're getting on it, we'll highlight with 5 values, by the way. So similar, I think I've had up to 8, whittled it down, but we reinforce a value every week. Our employee of the week and employee of the month, employee of the year are all tethered to the values, right? Who exemplified what and for what reason. And so, yes, right. Again, doesn't need to be rocket science. This is also an instance where I think, it's, you've got to find what works for your organization. But I do think there are a lot of just common sense best practices that are somewhat universal, right? If you really want to weave these things in that you can start doing tomorrow. Yeah.
And people know if you're putting values out there that really aren't genuine and authentic. I was, someone always reminded me of and I talk about this in the book, like, culture is not a sign hanging on the wall. There was a sign up at Enron that talked about their core values, and I had to look this up: integrity, communication, respect, and excellence. Right. was that what was actually going on at that company though? And you know, people, and maybe not everyone knew all the stuff that was going on, but it's much more important to live them and for people to feel like, look, this is really who we are. And if let's say you're all about attracting money, like making money, like I want to make as much money as possible. Be real with that and put that out there to a degree, and you're going to attract other people like you that are going to help you do that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just but it's you've got to be real with yourself, because you're going to attract the people who match up with your values.
Yeah, and look, there's two things I'd add on to that, right? Obviously, Enron is a great example because it's an extreme, but like even less extreme example is this concept of aspirational values, which can be sneaky, right? And we've had this, we've had this experience as we've gone through different iterations of this exercise where you think you're being authentic, you think this is something that we do, but then you kind of put your feet to the fire and say like, all right, well, name 5 employees or even 3 employees that embody this value, and it's like, oh, this is just something we hope to do, not something that we're actually doing, right? And so it's not, and not that we're doing anything illegal, not that we're doing anything shady, but it's just not really the way that we go out there and live our lives, and so that's a fun and interesting process, because as you read all the time, your values exist, right? It's just your job as a leadership team, your job as kind of the ultimate leader, CEO, owner, whatever your title is, to uncover and find what's there.
Can I ask you about how mission and vision fit into your world, Ben? I obviously know you pretty well, and I know you're a visionary guy. Like, the values are for who you actually are right now, right? And who you're living like. But then there is that aspirational part about who you want to become, and then that kind of core focus and purpose for who you're serving. How does that play into your culture, and what's the importance of it?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's actually, it's an aspect that we're playing with right now, right? I think we're in the middle of some pretty extreme kind of cultural transformation and trying to do some kind of edgy stuff in the industry and otherwise. And so I'm actually in the process. I just actually sent a draft. I'm in the process of playing with kind of that mission statement, right? Which a longer form version is kind of how I led the conversation when I was asked to talk a little bit about bangers and kind of the way that you can help shape the world as an organization through helping people to grow, right? And so that's kind of the lens, but at the same time, you don't want to ignore the fact that like, oh wait, we're still just a restaurant and we want to be like a kick-ass restaurant too, right? And so kind of holding those two things together. So I think I think one of the challenging things in any business, and again, goes back to actually the first thing I said, is keeping focus. And so I think that, this concept of a mission and a vision are great because they're clarifying and they can help bring you back as you begin to drift. On the vision side of things, I tend to go a little bit more long form than I think what I remember being discussed in the book. And so I go, there's different people that talk about it out there, but this concept of vivid visioning, there's a guy named Ari Weissenswag, I think is how you say his last name, but he's with the Zingerman's organization. He's the founder of that. Zingerman's out of Michigan, and he's an unbelievable guy to talk about culture and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I'll write, let's just say 1 to 5 year visions for the organization. Where are we going? What does it look like? How do you know what does success look like and feel like at some point in the future? Not an operating document, but then something that you can kind of present to your ops team, solicit feedback from them, right? And what I always say to them is like, look, this document should make you feel uncomfortable, but you need to believe that it's possible, even if it's going to be really hard. And so there's usually a little bit of an iterative process. I'd say the more aligned and confident your team is, it's actually a good litmus test. The more feedback you'll get. You send them a 6 or 10 page document and all you get are thumbs up. This sounds great. It's usually not a great sign of the state of your the candor in your culture. And then from there, you get to watch it come to life. And so it's sort of, it's funny. I presented a long form vision to our team a year ago. that is coming true now. And it's one of my favorite aspects of business, that future thinking, and then to get to watch it come together. So in short, right, I think that, kind of having, that mission statement is a crucial element in crystallizing and really not only to bring you back, but being able to communicate quickly, right? Like, what are we doing here and why are we doing it? What's the point? And then again, for that long form vision, to just know that everybody's on the right track and something that you can point back to and say, how did we get all the way over here when this is kind of what we agreed to?
How
Yeah.
do you, sorry to
No,
interject.
go ahead.
But I think that's great. How do you like practically make sure your employees know the vision, right? Understand the mission? Do you share that with candidates coming in the hiring process? Like, how do you make that part of your, week to week operations?
Yeah. So look, I think this terminology is a little, it can mean different things to different people, which is why I wanted to, want to be specific here, right? But the short answer is yes, right? Regardless of what you're calling it, I think as much as you can kind of daylight it and put it in front of people, the better off you are, right? Like, because it's the whole thing, right? You should have a vision and a mission that's inspiring, right? That you're really trying to do something that there's kind of energy and emotion behind. And why wouldn't you want everybody to see that? And just like Clint said, that not like, and to see it for one or two reasons, so that either they can say, heck yeah, this is something that I believe in and I want to be a part of, or you know what, this isn't for me, and I always say that when I go through the values and orientation, say, look, there's a million companies out there, there's a million different values. These are ours. They're no better or worse than anyone else's, but this is the foundations through which we build a culture. And, I got another really close friend of mine that's a restaurateur. Guy's a total workaholic, and he's totally good with that. And his wife is totally good with that, right? And what he wants to hire are people that just want to work their tails off. And in the restaurant industry, that's not super hard to find. I value more of a life of balance. And it's one of the core conflicts I have with my senior leadership is like, we can't preach this, we got to live it. And, and if you just want to work yourself to death, I got a really great guy that you can go do that with. And you guys can just talk to each other at 3 o'clock in the morning about, barbecue. And so again, I think it's just about finding your people, right? And my recommendation, for if there's any employees listening, right? It's like, fall in love with the culture, don't fall in love with the job, right? And if you can do that, right? If you're in a great organization that's really aligned, you should be able to find your home within that, and I think Clint said it in the book when he was talking about kind of A players, B players, C players, that like just about everybody has an A player in them. And again, I'm the owner of a successful business, right? But I can think of a lot of jobs that I would be an absolute C player at. Like there's so many things that I am not good at. I feel so lucky I found my way into the position I'm in. But like, man, I think even Clint said it, I say it all the time, if I was a lawyer, man, if I was a carpenter, I'd be the worst carpenter in the world, right? We just built something. I watch these stonemasons like do this, right? Like hourly grunt labor. And it's like, I could never do that. Right? College education, all this stuff. You want me to lay bricks? I'd be the worst. And so it's a two-way street. I think employees need to find their way. And as employers, we need to have an open mind to where you see potential in people and do your best to find their place in your organization if you can. And this is what I think is crucial to me, or have the courage to let them go. And I think that's one of the core, like the biggest mistake I've made consistently as an owner, and I do think I'm getting better, is just holding on to people too long and not giving them the opportunity they deserve to be successful somewhere else. And it sounds like a cheesy buzzword, but man, it's so true. And I've had so many conversations with old employees where we've done the right thing in that way, and they've just thanked us. And it's just like, man, like their whole career took off once they got out of this stuck place that they were in with us. Sorry about the rant.
That was awesome.
I love
I talked about Drive by Daniel Pink as a book that I love and inspired me. And really, I think what you really want with your team is is a team that's intrinsically inspired, right? Like they're motivated to just work hard and to help you achieve all the stuff that you've laid out there, achieve your vision, achieve this mission. There's three things that he talks about: autonomy, mastery, and purpose, right? With purpose, I think it's about having that mission, right? Like, what is it that we're doing? And are we selling insurance, or are we, protecting people from unexpected stuff? Like, I know someone who went to go work in an insurance company. They're like, I lost my house when I was really young, but this insurance person that was there, they showed so much care for us and really helped us get back on our feet. And I never forgot that. And I want to do that for other people. All right, that's like a dream hire for an insurance agent, but that's really what you want to go for, is people that really care and want to help you solve those problems. On the autonomy side, I think a lot of it's the vision and the values, right? Like you've got to tell them, hey, here's where I want to go. Here's where we need to go as an organization. Here are some of the guidelines. Here's how we're going to operate. I'm not going to tell you exactly how to get there, but this is where we need to go. That people love that. A players thrive in that environment and say, don't tell me exactly what to do. Just tell me where we need to go and roughly how you want to go about some of the guidelines, and let them run with it. Even on the front line, you look at a company like Ritz-Carlton, one of my favorite examples of a great organization. They allow their frontline team members to spend up to $2,000 to solve any customer or guest issue. No questions asked, no approvals. Obviously, the value of a guest there is, I think they calculated as a couple $100,000 over someone's lifetime. And they said, you know what, it's worth it for us. And imagine how empowered those people feel working at that organization. Like, they don't feel like they have a job. They feel like they have a career there, even if it's not something they're going to do their whole life. And then the last one on the mastery piece, this is just that's part of for us and for Ben, it's part of our culture. So we went remote during COVID and decided to not go back. We decided to start hiring people from all over the country, the best talent. So we didn't have that office culture as much anymore. So what we decided to really focus on instead was personal growth. And we wanted to hire, one of our values is keep growing. And we wanted to hire people who really valued personal growth. And we invested in them. We took someone from our team and helped her transition into a role as a coach. And she works with our team members. And look, this is still early. There's a lot more we want to do with this, but we're helping people set dream goals that are even unrelated to work and accomplish them. And it feels really good. And we're just getting started on that, but that's a big part of what we want our culture to be like. And then as far as mastery in the role, right? Even if it's a dishwasher, or even if it's a cook or whatever else, like, how can you line them up to be able to get better and better at what they're doing, right? Can you teach some knife skills to someone and make them feel like, man, I'm way better at my job now that I work at this company than I was before? Those are a lot of the big things that would motivate me to really develop a strong culture.
Yeah, really well said, Clint. And it struck a chord with me, and I'll do another quick plug for that book, Reinventing Organizations, and it introduced me to a concept that was quite unsettling and really like a punch to the gut. And when you look at sort of the culture funnel, right? And so again, you set these values, and here's who we are, this and that. Now, here's an interesting process, right? You start looking at your company policies, and then you objectively say, well, what are these policies communicating about the way we feel about the people that work for us? Yeah. If you anything like a restaurant organization, it's basically, you're dumb and we don't trust you, is essentially what most of, and we as employers are scared, right? They're kind of fear-based reactions. And so, what that Ritz-Carlton example you gave is the perfect example of the opposite of that. You're smart and we trust you, right? And we actually did something very similar. Right now, all front of house employees in our organization, we took away all manager authority to approve comps, and they have an unlimited comp budget on daily, weekly, monthly basis, whatever. So not even a $2,000 cap, right? Again, it's not the Ritz-Carlton, so I'd be shocked if they could spend that much money. But we gave them, and it's this other concept of like, it's like context over control, right? And hey, here's, number one, you should always have Banger's best interest in mind. and like, don't do anything illegal. And then from there, you kind of give examples like, look, your roommate comes in and you want to buy them dinner. It's great. Your roommate comes in every Thursday and they get a free meal. You're stealing and you're fired immediately, right? And so that's been a really interesting process and something we're very much on the front end of, but really analyzing what our policies are communicating and whether or not our policies are in alignment with the values that we claim.
It's a great point because, and I know the book that inspired you on some of this, No Rules Rules, the guy from Netflix, at least.
Oh, yeah.
And I read it too. And I realized I'm like, some of these policies you put in place, it's usually like, oh, someone screwed up, someone did something wrong. And so you're putting a policy in place and you're basically saying, I don't trust any of you now to do this. You gotta follow these rules and do stuff that's going to take you away from the mission of really taking care of our clients, because there's a small percentage of people that have abused it. And I agree, man. I think that's wrong. And what that does is what the guy in Netflix, the founder, Reed, argues is that if you have just a bunch of rules in your organization, right, all you're going to create is a team of rule followers, right? You're going to encourage that type of culture. And that's fine if that's the kind of culture you want. But if you want a culture of innovators and a culture of people who are going to challenge and push, that's not the culture you're going to have by creating a bunch of rules.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And exactly right. And even Reed would say, and by the way, in our accounting department, we got a bunch of rules because we want a bunch of people that aren't thinking creatively and are following rules. So even within the organization, you can have sort of these subcultures. But again, it all starts with how you hire. Right? Like without the talent density, a lot of these cool, heady concepts that we're talking about, like with the wrong culture, with the wrong team, and I can just speak from experience as a guy that's wrecked his company a couple of times, you'll get taken hostage, right? And you just feed guns to the pirates on the ship, and they just take you over. So yeah, and Reed talks about that in that book, right? And again, I would look at No Rules. Again, that book, In Everyone Culture, I think he kind of stumbled into a lot of those concepts in Reinventing Organization. They'll sort of lay the concepts out for you more objectively. But he talks about this concept of talent density, right? And you start with anyways, I don't need to do a plug for that book. We're talking about it.
Well, I want to throw y'all a question we just got from the chat, actually, which I think builds into like, how can we actually show off our great culture to attract people? So Angie asked, what steps would you recommend with developing an employment brand with a company that doesn't have it clearly defined yet?
So define it, like just take the time to define it. Like why are you trying to go to step 2? Why don't you just do step 1 first?
Well, maybe she's not in a position to be able to do that. She's not the owner or whatever else. The big thing for me is authenticity, right? Like you don't need to have a budget to go hire a video crew to do some big montage of your company or whatever else. Like I've seen some of the most effective things I've seen is like a message from the hiring manager, from the owner. Like, hey, I'm recording a video. Here's who I am. I want to introduce myself. I'm Clint. This is what I'm all about. Here's what I'm looking for. Do you want to join my team? It's kind of like they talk about Jim Collins, like, you want to get on the bus, the right people, the right seats. It's like, hey, I got a bus here. Here's where I'm going. I hope you want to join for the ride if you make the right match. And then also just give your employees a voice, right? Like this is part of trust. Like if you have employees that are sort of your culture ambassadors, like get them out there, talk to them about it, because you want to hire more people like them in a lot of ways. So ask them about that. And what is it that would make them really attracted to the company? But for me, it's like, get your values on there, get your mission. We don't have our whole vision statement on there, but we send it to people before their interview. So we really try to inform people as much as possible. And then we have a lot of stuff, employee testimonials, photos, I think even some videos. Like that's the stuff that I feel like really makes a difference. And it might be a little grassroots and unpolished, but I think that that's important. And I also, like, if you're part of a bigger organization, a lot of our clients are, part of a franchise system or other type of organization. You've got like the culture and the brand that's set there. And you obviously can't go too far from that, but you need to establish your own kind of personal context there, right? Like, here's who I am, here's who our organization is within this, and here's what we're all about, here's where we're trying to go. Because as you guys know, not every owner or location within those organizations is the same. They're all different, right? And sometimes you might even be competing against someone that's in your territory that's kind of part of the same brand. Like, how is it that you're going to differentiate yourself? What is your organization all about? That's the stuff I would communicate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
Ben.
Well, again, I think that, I'm going to just guess and go from the perspective of like, this is a hiring manager that's trying to build the brand, but like it's sort of not defined, and she doesn't have the autonomy and authority to define it. So I'm going to pretend that's who I'm talking to. And then I'd go with a lot of what we talked about here, which is like, look, spend time in the organization, talk to people in the organization, and from there you can kind of deduce what is really going on, right? All of that stuff exists, right? The best version of it is the mining of it and the uncovering of it. And so experience that culture yourself, and then through the materials that you're producing, you don't need to say, here's our values, but describe what it is that you're seeing in as positive a light as possible. And you can sort of get there in not quite as poignant of a way, but in a way that aligned people would read it and say, oh, those sound like my people. It sounds like a good time.
Yeah, Ben, when we were preparing for this conversation, you kind of mentioned this correlation between your focus on your culture and then the quality of applicants you started to receive. Can you just go a little more into like, what did that look like for you? Like, what did y'all do to put your employment brand and culture out more in front of applicants?
Yeah, look, it's wild, right? And again, it's you find it right here in the book, but it's because it's you see it at the beginning of the book and the end of the book, right? And where on the one hand, Clint talks about how to define these things and how to mine these things and how to kind of put that collateral together. And then on the back end of the book, he talks about basically retaining your team and how that's your best hiring strategy is not only to keep the good people that you have, but then utilize those people as a mouthpiece to get other people to come work for the organization. And so in a way, it's this kind of chicken and the egg sort of a deal, right? And I think that there is a kind of a practical way that happens, right? Which is, again, as he talks about in the book, A players attract A players, right? And so when someone looks up and they're like, and again, like we see this in the kitchens, in our kitchen that we'll run, right? Where like, there's a set kind of, there can be a cyclical nature to this, but, we made some sort of key front of house hires, and then, they'd all worked at restaurants. And so there was like this one guy that was like, he's a South American guy, and a bunch of family that worked in the restaurant industry at all these different restaurants, but he was kind of like the patriarch. And so he came and worked like 2 shifts a week at the restaurant. And he was like the tip of the spear to say, all right, I trust these guys. Let me see what this kitchen culture is like and see if I'm willing to bring my, kind of my people over. And again, I think we have like 6 members of this guy's family now working for us. This guy's there full time. And like, and it was because he seeded. So I think there's like a practical nature that happens like that, right? Like, oh, you see someone that you know what kind of person they are, and they'll come. The other thing that I've experienced, which is a little more ethereal, is like people just popping out of the woodwork, right? Like I was telling Clint, we're talking to this woman right now for sort of a higher level head of people ops role. And the first time I sat and spoke to her, she had just taken another job. The time just wasn't right. And I just, and also like, had I hired this person at that time, it would have been a disaster. Like the organization was just not in a place to hire her, but she was like the dream hire for the role. And like just yesterday, I looked up and, she's looking for a job right now. And not only are we in a position to do it, but I have so much confidence in kind of the guy that's right below me, this guy, Albert, who's phenomenal, that I'm just like, Albert, reach out to this lady. She's unbelievable. And they're going to have lunch tomorrow. And I'm not even involved in the process on what will be one of the most key hires that we make for the next few years. And I'm not saying we're going to hire this person, but like you just start to attract in sort of the zeitgeist, higher level talent. And I think then psychologically, there's an element of like, you know, again, whereas before it was like, man, we're not good enough to hire this person. And that was true, right? You're not. And then right now I'm looking and saying, shoot, man, like, yeah, like we're ready for this. Like we've leveled up to that point where we can hire this kind of talent. So there's like a self-fulfilling prophecy to it.
Yeah, I love that. And we got another question in that I want to throw to y'all. So John asked, could you talk more about the process you went through to create core values? Was it lengthy? How many participated? Did they all agree?
Which time? And I just tell you this, right? One of the mistakes you can make, and one that I've made, is like a search for perfection in these things. And I'm living this very much right now of like, you know, it's what's helped me with that a little bit is that these things can be edited and changed over time. And so that's given me more confidence in sort of releasing and using them. But Clint, why don't you take this one first, man? Because you really go into detail in the book.
Yeah. And John, I outlined this in the first chapter, and you guys are going to have a chance to download the book, but it's we had a leadership team. The most recent version of this that we did, which Natalie was probably 5 years ago, something like that, before, somewhere around there. We got together as a leadership team and said, okay, who at our company just exemplifies our culture and who we want to be as an organization. And then we said, okay, what is it about that person that we love so much and that really exemplifies culture? And so we were able to basically create a prospect list of core values based on that. And then from there, we consolidated a couple that were pretty similar. We eliminated a couple that weren't as important or that felt too aspirational. And we were able to, and we also looked, I think we got rid of one that it was a great core value, but we found that it didn't do a good enough job of like differentiating between really great fits at the company and then others, because there were a lot of people who hadn't been a great fit at the company that we would have checked the box for that core value had we put it in. We ended up with 4, and then we spent a lot of time defining those to actually show people this is exactly what we mean by this value. And I think we even attached like a quote to each one. And then from there, we incorporated it into our everyday. So we talk about it in the book. The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni also gets into, if you want even more detail, talks about it. It's one way to do it, right? There's other ways, but it's the way that's worked best for us. And these values have stuck, and we've been able to grow with them, you know, probably 30, 40 employees up to, you know, 100 now. So they've withstood some tests.
You know, a couple things I'd ladder onto that, because again, I'll say that I've you know, we've used actually a pretty much mirror image of what Clint described in the book, and with a lot of success. I'll plug another book real quick, and really kind of a group. There's the Conscious Leadership Group. They wrote a book called The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. And one of the things that I think it was them, but they sort of, they outline, I think it's like 5 kind of derivatives of decision-making. And I think it's really important at the onset of a process like that you're really clear with yourself and also your team as to how this is going to go. And as an example, we're going to have this values discussion. Well, at the end of that discussion, are we voting on it? And then winner, like whoever gets the most votes win? Or are we going to discuss it? Am I going to solicit feedback as the owner, but then am I retaining the decision-making authority as an owner to make this call? And I don't think there's any right or wrong answer to it, right? And it goes all the way from just the owner making the decision with no, you know, feedback whatsoever. And then the far end is like, you know, the whole organization votes on it, right? And there's no right or wrong answer. What's crucial is you explain up front how it's going to work so nobody feels disenfranchised, right? Because if someone thinks they get an equal vote, but ultimately you're making a call, they're going to get their feelings hurt. So that's one thing I'd say. And then the other thing is a lot like, and I describe this as something that we do regularly, even now, in these values that have existed for years, is these should be used as a tool, right? For hiring and firing and discipline and all these other things. If you feel that it's missing something, that's a great way to refine the values in sort of real time. What languaging would you like to add to this description of the value that would help you do X, Y, or Z?
Yeah, and I would really encourage you to not just like draft up the values yourself and then just get them to your team and say, hey, what do you think? Right? Because they're going to be like, yeah, these look good, or they might push back a little bit, but you have the loudest voice in the room, and it's wise to stay quiet at the beginning and listen to what they have to say. You naturally, everyone has blind spots and things that you're not seeing. Like, how do they see your culture? How do they see your organization? Let them develop it. Don't come with your draft. Let it kind of develop organically. The idea of attaching it to employees of the company also is a way to check and make sure that it's not too aspirational, that we're actually doing these things, or some people in the organization doing these things. But and then afterwards you can weigh in with your own thoughts. That's an approach that I would recommend. I'm not always the best at doing that, but with stuff that's really important, like values, I think it's really worth the extra time to do it.
Yeah. Well, our time is almost up, if you can believe it here, almost at an hour. So I just want to, as we close, throw this back up on the screen so you can see some additional resources. Again, we're going to send you a follow-up with a place you can download a free copy of the book, but if you're impatient, there's a QR code there, so you're welcome to grab your copy now. And then the other thing I will do is just, if you want some more information, if you're a CareerPlug client and you're interested in a consultation with our hiring expert team, we can follow up specifically with you. Or if you're not familiar with CareerPlug and you're interested in learning more, go ahead and let us know there and we'll reach out. So I'll leave that poll up just for a second here. But Clint, Ben, any kind of closing thoughts or like a piece of advice you'd want to leave people with today?
I mean, one thing I jump in and say, just that I want to, it says it on the screen, but just to reinforce again, I was, kind of wrapping the book up this morning, and, and I sent a text to my, my director of operations, and along with each chapter are resources that are housed on the How to Hire website. And it's like great stuff. Again, like it's, this is anybody that's interested in this, right? It's a great synthesis of wonderful knowledge and some new ideas that are out there. But I think what sets it apart from some of the other books I've read is, if what feels like a genuine desire to help people, and then resources past the book to help you do that, right? Like, here's how to hire, here's the form that's going to help you grade your employees, create the job posting and all that stuff. And so it's a really amazing resource. So that's what I wanted to say.
And I would thank Ben, thanks for joining us. The one thing I'd say, guys, is be intentional. Don't just let your culture be what it is, right? Be intentional about building your culture, and write down one thing that you learned today and take action on it. That's just one practice that I try to have when I invest time in doing things like this. We really appreciate you investing your time.
100%. Ben, Clint, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining. Look out for follow-up resources and have a great rest of your day.